Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here. Another episode of Meaningful Live, applying to our personal and psychological and emotional lives, biblical events, personalities, and narratives. One of the big questions you hear throughout history, both in fact and fiction, the attempt and the search for the fountain of youth. People want to achieve immortality, eternity. The pharaohs of old seeked out doing so in bizarre ways, whether it was through embalmment or burying their brides and their children with them in their sphinxes and pyramids, or in our modern age, cryogenic freezing, the search for the fountain of youth. It also is basically a billion-dollar industry of pharmaceuticals that attempts at Botox in some way to retard the aging process, to maintain our vitality in every possible way. Today we're going to learn that there is actually a secret to achieving eternity and immortality. So we're calling this program, Is There Life After Death? Eternal Lessons from Our Matriarch, Sarah. This program is dedicated by Kevin Burmeister in loving memory of his dear mother, Linda Burmeister, whose yahrzeit is on the 12th of Menachem of Mar Cheshvan. Okay. Begin with a story. It was many years ago. I was invited to speak at a shloshim. A shloshim is the 30th day of the passing of someone, and it's a particular stage of the soul's elevation and the relationship of the soul with its family and friends. The event was in the Upper West Side. I wasn't yet sure what I was going to say. I usually gauge the audience, see everybody has their own perspective of things and the language, what language to use, what analogies to use, and how to try to communicate in a personal way to the particular audience, what I always like to do. But as we were driving up the West Side Highway, I was thinking of different ideas, and I usually look for the signs, literally. So I'm looking out the window and I see a big billboard. It was on the right side of the highway, I remember. For Newport cigarettes. Yes, Newport cigarettes. Two beautiful faces, a man and a woman, gleaming smile. I mean, envious. You should have seen those white teeth. And they're just, you want to be like them. And it says, alive with pleasure. And on the bottom, Newport cigarettes. And of course, the prerequisite box in the bottom left hand of the corner of the billboard, large enough that we can read it from the road, that smoking kills, carbon monoxide. I don't remember what the threats were, but basically, besides the paradox of advertising that this beautiful faces, and it's definitely working because they wouldn't be spending money on this advertising if it wasn't working. And while it also tells you it kills, carbon monoxide can affect the pregnancy. I mean, all the different warnings. That's its own story of its own, the irony of that. But I said to myself, there I have it. That's my topic. Alive with pleasure. As I said, the whitest teeth you've ever seen. And I was thinking to myself, one second, truth in advertising. Anyone that you know that smokes, that has such white teeth, and he's definitely not going to show you an x-ray of their lungs, but it looks good. You know, in Madison Avenue, they'll say, it doesn't matter what happened, it matters what people think happened. It looks good, it's beautiful. Great. And they're defining that not just alive, but alive with pleasure. It happened to be, it was also the week when we read in the Torah, in the Bible, this week's chapter, which is the chapter about the life of Sarah. That's what it's called. The chapter is called The Life of Sarah. In Hebrew, Chaya Sarah. So I said to myself, look at the contrast. Look at the contrast. What is life? What does it mean to be alive? And not just alive, but with pleasure. Because when you read the Torah chapter, you read the biblical chapter on the story, you think, talk about truth in advertising, the Chaya Sarah means the life of Sarah. You think, okay, that's the headline. So the chapter is all going to be about her life. Hey, lo and behold, right in the first verse, if you just finish the sentence, it says the life of Sarah, who lived 127 years old and died. And then it continues the story of Abraham seeking a burial place for her. And then continuing that whole story about that, of looking for a bride for their son Isaac, who finally finds a woman, Rivka, the servant of Abraham finds Rivka. And how does Isaac know that she's the right one? Which is another interesting twist. Most people don't want to marry anyone like their mother. Well, he wanted someone exactly like his mother. Well, as close as possible. He saw that Rivka emulated his mother's noble virtues, her queenly, majestic attitude, as the Torah tells us, as the Bible tells us. So it's all about stories happening after Sarah's passing. And yet the chapter is called The Life of Sarah. Seems quite odd. You want to dedicate a chapter to her life? She lived, and that previous chapter talks about it in detail. All her beautiful qualities and how she gave birth to Isaac and the different things that she shared with Abraham as they helped transform the world as pioneers, trailblazers of monotheism, of virtue, of giving, of kindness, compassion. So of all chapters, what's called The Life of Sarah, the story of her death and the events subsequent to that. How do you explain it? And this is the talk I gave at the Shloshim of the passing of someone, a friend and a colleague and a family member of the people that invited me. And I said the following. We live in a world where, yes, the sizzle always is more dominating than the steak. People say that one of the great cliches, and most cliches are not necessarily all right, never judge a book by its cover. Everybody judges a book by its cover. I can tell you as an author, it's a major industry. Packaging, book covers, design. People do make that judgment. That's why how much money goes into packaging. You ever buy something? The packaging is important or more important because that's your first impression. Now, sometimes if it's a good quality product, the product lives up to the packaging, or the packaging lives up to the product, I should say. Sometimes it's not the case. So, yeah, everyone judges a book by its cover. We live in a world where we can be seduced by our senses, and we are constantly being seduced by them and being manipulated, whether it's our sight, our sound, our taste, touch, and smell. So you can have an advertisement that says alive with pleasure, something that kills, that's proven to kill, and they're even saying that in the advertisement, but it looks so beautiful. And then you can have the story of Sarah, and when do you call it life? Not when she's living, but after she passes. How do you explain this seemingly completely antithetical and counterintuitive definition? So let's define what is life. So the biological, scientific, medical definition of life is, well, there's the argument when it actually begins, pregnancy, what stage. But the end of life, the heart stops, the mind stops. People have their definition. It's not that relevant, but there is a technical definition. But is that really the definition of life? You can be living in this world, breathing, your heart is beating, your mind is working, and you feel miserable. Many people say, I'm like a zombie. I'm like the Walking Dead. I don't feel emotionally alive. I don't feel stimulated. I don't feel inspired. My life isn't worth living. I mean, it gets worse than that. But living, physically living, yes, has the medical definition of life, but is that fully life? The mystics and the Kabbalah says there are 5 dimensions actually to what we call life. One is biological life. We all agree there's an element of physical life, but you can be alive and emotionally dead or emotionally not alive. So there's a second level called ruach, which is the spirit, not just nefesh, but ruach, an emotional life. Then there's intellectual life. You can be emotionally attracted to something, but your mind, you feel your mind is numb. So there's intellectual life. And then there's transcendent life, a spiritual life. And then there's a life of utter seamlessness, fusion, where it all comes together with a deep purpose that permeates everything that you do. And that's called Yechida. The 4th level is called Chaya. The 3rd level is called Neshama. The 2nd is called Ruach. And the 1st is called Nefesh. So you see right there, when we say alive, there are many definitions of what it means to be alive. We're not even getting into alive with pleasure. We'll talk about that shortly. So what it comes down to is this. There are people who have lived on this earth. And while they were here in this world, they were tyrants. People were terrified of them. They had control of the entire world, entire nations, and you can mention many names like that. Now, at the time that they were in control, they were as alive as it gets. Not only were they alive, they controlled and they had power, dominion over everybody, over millions and millions of people. They either terrorized or they inspired. There were many leaders that were benevolent leaders. But many, as soon as they died, people couldn't wait to completely forget about them. So yes, they were alive, and the history books will be written about Hitler and about Stalin and about many others. I'm just using some contemporary ones in the last century. But they will be remembered not for anything noble. So were they truly alive? Just because they had control? And then there are people that even when they were alive, physically, maybe very few people knew about them, but they changed someone's life for the good. Someone that did a favor for you, someone that helped you in a time of need, when others ignored you. You will never forget them. And if you're a person of gratitude, you will make sure that others don't forget them. Generations to come. So here we are talking about Sarah 3,800 years ago. And we talk about her, we read the chapter, we try to emulate her life again and again, because this real sign of life, and that is really the eternity of life, is not how powerful it is while it's there. How powerful it is when it's not there. When physically that person is no longer here. Is she or he remembered? So that's why the chapter says, you want to know the life of Sarah? Yes, we can tell you about the activities she was involved in. They were beautiful activities. But you want to know her life, true life? We will tell you things about the impact that she wasn't forgotten and never will be forgotten. So you really want to know the test of something that's truly enduring? It's not whether it's preserved in some cryogenic freezer or in some embalming, or like Lenin's mausoleum where he's preserved through chemicals or whatever it is. Alive, that the person's values, legacy, destiny, things they were committed to, lives on in their children and grandchildren, students, people they impacted. And that's the story of Alive with Pleasure. Yes, Newport cigarettes, and I'm not here to criticize Newport cigarettes. I hope no one's listening to this is going to report it, if you know what I mean. But the point is that it's just a study in contrast of what it means to be alive. A real life, not one that is photoshopped or in some other way creates the image of vibrancy, of youth, but one that really is youthful because the soul never dies. The things that will live on in your life are the things that are not about temporary, impermanent things. You know, the food you eat, the money you make, the other things that are all perishable, mortal, will deteriorate, will age, and will at some point perish. The things that will live on forever are the good deeds that you do. The small acts, the large acts of kindness, how you affect another person. And indeed, the Talmud does say a fascinating statement that it talks about Jacob in the same light. How do you know he's truly alive? Since his children are alive, so too is he alive. Not just that he has children, but children that are living up to a legacy. I've thought about this often. You know, if you asked anyone in the Western world at least, who's the greatest philosopher in the Western world in history? So many will say Aristotle. I mean, some will say Plato, Socrates, and others. Okay, who's the greatest English writer? Shakespeare. What about the artist? Okay, you'll have a debate. Rembrandt, Van Gogh. I mean, there's all kinds of different music. Bach, Beethoven, Mozart. I'm not getting into a voting contest. It's not a contest of popularity. Just choose any name you like. And then ask yourself the question, did Aristotle have children? Did he have grandchildren? Are there anyone around on this earth that can say, yes, I'm a grandchild of Aristotle's. I continue his Aristotelian philosophies? Or of Shakespeare, or Bach, or of Rembrandt? We don't even know if they had children. Did they leave us great legacies of music and art and thought, philosophy and ethics? Absolutely. That have shaped Western civilization and all of civilization in many ways. But it's interesting that even students, which are called like children, They may have had students right at that time, and we know some of the names of their students. But you don't see it perpetuated as a living, is there an Aristotelian community? Yes, there are Aristotelian thinkers and philosophers. There's something about maybe the ego, that once a person contributes something, did not see the necessity to make sure there are other people living by it. And maybe it's because they really did not have a living model. They had ideas, they had art, they had music. To think about Abraham and Sarah, I see them as being people whose their values, millions and billions of people have embraced. Their values, not just their ideas, not just their art and their creativity. And I'm not trying to compare, I'm just trying to point out, when you look for the secret to eternity, you need to look for something that people are still talking about. So Aristotle, of course, he's spoken about, but in the full sense of the word, Sarah is the ultimate model in that sense. And what you have here is the secret to immortality. You see, the ego wants to live on forever. But here's the interesting irony. As long as it's driven by the ego itself undermines its own eternity because it's not eternal. It's all about you. And as powerful as you are, everything has a beginning, everything has an end. Things come to an end. However, it's when you come and introduce into your life something that's beyond your ego, beyond self-expression, self-interest. When you come to embrace something greater than you are, then you become an extension of that which is greater than you. And if it's eternal, you become an extension of eternity. So that's like turning it inside out. The thing that drove and drives most people is self-preservation. Survival of the fittest, if you wish. Or you want to use less aggressive or violent terms, let's use terms like perpetuating yourself. That very concept, as much as you want eternity, fountain of youth, to live on forever, in itself undermines that very capacity. It's when you give up. I don't want to use the word surrender because it has such negative implications, but it is a form of surrender. When you're able to suspend yourself in the spirit of something greater, in the name of service, in the name of love, in the name of kindness, in the name of contributing something that is beyond yourself, you then, interestingly, become an extension of that. And if that is an eternal value, you live on eternally. That is why the life of Sarah is indeed accurate name for this chapter. Because when do you see it? When do you recognize it? What's the litmus test? Is the impact on others. What lives on? And I mean, you can say the ego trip is, okay, I'll have influence on others so they'll remember me. Fine. But the point is, it's the influence, it's the values. It's transcending your limited box. People speak about being out of the box. Transcending your limited, finite box to becoming an ambassador, an agent, a channel for something that is beyond mortal, something immortal, values, love. And that is passed on to children, to students, to friends, to anyone where you make that type of impact. And it is a permanent impact, which lives on beyond our biological and physical selves. So there is a secret to immortality. It is, in the Hasidic lingo, it's called bittul. Bittul means suspending yourself in the face of something greater. And paradoxically, bittul is the only thing that can be destroyed. Because bittul means your suspending yourself. Suspension can't be suspended. Because its very essence is defined by suspension. Its very essence is defined by giving up. And that is the true definition of love, my friends. Not just love because it's a need. I'll give you something because you give me something. No, love as in transcendence. That I am now connecting to something beyond myself. And that is the essence of love. Not a selfish love, a transcendent love. And that creates true eternity. So you're thinking of love forever after, or anything that's eternal. This is the secret. But there's one thing you have to keep in mind: it cannot remain about you. That's the key to it all. It's a dedication to something greater than yourself, which in return gives you something that gives you eternity. You live on forever. Immortality, eternity. I want to wish each of you, I want to wish you, wherever you are, to be able to have a taste of that. Try it out. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It's not a formula, that's not a potion that you drink. And it's not any type of external. It's your commitment. Do something that is loving. Do something that is kind. Share a nice note with someone. That lives on forever. Whether you know or not know the impact. When you see the impact and the fruits, obviously it's very gratifying. But even if you don't always see it, it lives on forever. A ripple effect. Today in physics we know nothing can be destroyed. So energy turns into matter, matter into energy. Good energy lives on forever. Bad energy may also live on, but ultimately it will be nullified by other forces and factors. We're talking about the connection to eternal, to the immortal. Be blessed. Know that you and your life and your actions and your words and your thoughts can be infused and become eternal and immortal. That is the greatest blessing. So every act you do today lives on forever. Forever and ever. Thank you. This has been Simon Jacobson. Please stay in touch. Please like, share, comment, suggest. MeaningfulLife.com is our website. But we're on all the different platforms. These programs can be viewed and shared eternally, actually, as long as technology is around. It's yet another way of immortalizing something. And again, I thank you very much. It's always an honor to share a few words with you. Be well.